when you look at it with the benefit of hindsight, it's a very sad story. And I'm not sure that whether people really understand what happened, but really what happened at the beginning, everybody wanted the Chinese to share data about the early cases, and they wanted them to share data about the virus. So what was decided at the time was to be very nice to China.
Yeah, I've talked to people, very senior people in this country, and they say the same thing.
And you have to remember at the time, nobody knew that there would be millions of deaths. I mean, it's best what people could imagine at the time, that there would be maybe 1,000 deaths or 2,000 deaths, just like with SARS-1, okay? So it's no big deal. In that context at the time, it made a certain sense to try to be supportive of China and shut up, not disclose all the dots you had, and try to create a very positive narrative. And to try to get access to that data, they don't play it. There was nothing, effectively. There was nobody on the ground. There was no data sharing that we can speak of. There was just a blank denial. But what became very apparent too is that the whole debate, which should have been a scientific debate, became very quickly entangled into some politics.
Do you think that there are questions related to the science of viruses that we should not ask?
There are experiments that even common sense tells you shouldn't do. What we're talking about now is the gain-of-function research in studies that increase predominantly the transmissibility as well as pathogenesis and alteration of host range of the virus. Should we get a microbe that is absolutely not spread by respiratory route, and should we make it a respiratory route virus?
But it has to change, because if they run the same nonsense again, it won't be 8 million people that die. It'll be more than 10 times that many. We can't have the same nonsense.
I'm afraid we're not part of the decision.
No, but we'll be the people who'll die.
No, we're not part of the decision. I mean, we don't. That's a problem. I think it's called the D.R.A.S.T.I.C problem. There's a fact that you can't control what another country does. That's it. And we're not part of the decision. I mean, we can try. The WHO can try. Everybody can try. But at the end of the day, you had SARS-1, you had the bird flu, you've got COVID-19. I don't see why the next one would be any better.
Hello and thanks for joining us. My name's Ian Stroud.
And my name is David Malone, and this is Hyperland. I thought there's been quite big news on the COVID cover-up front, and I thought now was a good moment to talk to one of the people who was in our film, a man called Gilles Dumaneuf.
That was the Channel 4 film that you did?
That's right.
Was that was on the origins?
It was, yes. Didn't make us any friends, but history has proved that everything we said was right. Well, I mean, we knew that at the time because everyone said they were going to sue us and nobody did. And that's a sure sign that they would love to have sued us, but their lawyer said, you can't, because everything they said was true.
Okay, so Gilles and this new evidence facts.
Yeah, let's talk about the evidence, mate.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, 2022,
yeah,
there was a paper called, it's got a fantastic title, Endonuclease Fingerprint Indicates a Synthetic Origin of SARS-CoV-2. All right. By three fellows, Valentin Brutel, Alex Washburn, and Antonius van Dongen. At the time, I wrote to Alex Washburn because I read this paper and I thought, oh my God, this is as close to a smoking gun as I've ever seen. Now, I didn't hear back from him because he probably was contacted by much more important people from bigger outlets.
Yeah.
And it's a proper science paper. It was up on BioRix. And to boil it right down, and of course, by boiling it down, I'm cutting a lot of corners.
Yeah.
But essentially what he did is he said, look, if I think there's a chance that this virus was put together in a lab, there are the techniques by which you can sew a synthetic virus together. And they leave fingerprints, which can be erased,
right,
but often they're not. And essentially what it is you use certain restriction enzymes And a restriction enzyme is just a little enzyme that can latch onto a stretch of DNA or RNA, and by doing so, essentially cuts it.
Right.
What he did is he analyzed they analyzed the genome, and they said, are there any of these places where the restriction enzyme latches on? And this happens in nature, so there will be
natural.
These places. But nature tends to cut them into not evenly spaced, and you'd expect them to be distributed across the genome in a certain way. Yeah, exactly. Right, okay. What tends to happen when it's done synthetically in the lab is the people will put the places in where they can be cut fairly regularly and cut the genome into shortish lengths. Right. So what they did is they say, right, can we find any of these and how are they distributed? And what they found is that it broke up into, I think, 6 chunks, which were pretty evenly distributed, which isn't natural.
Right.
I'm just going to read a little bit here. He said they found that the longest fragment lengths in SARS-CoV-2 were significantly shorter than those of natural COVs. That's the family of viruses that SARS-CoV is in. And the longest fragment in SARS-CoV-2 is in the bottom 1% of the longest fragments for all restriction maps analyzed. In other words, all of the other related viruses. So it's very, very atypical.
Yeah.
Another one, the longest fragment is more standard deviations below the wild type than for any other non-engineered COV. So both the shortest and the longest fragments that they found are nothing like what they'd expect from an analysis of all natural ones. So
each length was 1% kind of.
No. In other words, the lengths that they found were similar to only the 1% of the others of the natural occurring ones. So any way you look at it, when they looked at the way these restriction enzymes and the fragments that they gave were distributed, it didn't look anything like natural occurring ones.
Yeah, this is feeling a bit like an episode of CSI, if I'd ever watched them.
well, it's exactly that. It's exactly what you're doing is doing really good science to say, are there fingerprints here? Are there telltale signs?
Yeah.
And that's what they're looking for. They know what the telltale signs would look like, and they know how a naturally occurring genome should look. And this didn't look anything like it should look if it had been evolved naturally.
Yeah.
He said, look, we found that the SARS-CoV has a fingerprint that's typical for synthetic viruses. Both the restriction site fingerprint and the pattern of mutations generating them are extremely unlikely in wild coronaviruses and nearly universal in synthetic viruses. Our findings strongly suggest a synthetic origin for SARS-CoV-2. Right. And the science is solid. Now, afterwards, the usual suspects, Holmes and Anderson, the ones who signed the
letter.
And the proximal origins, came out and said, "Oh, this is terrible science. This is, I forget what they called it, this is kindergarten science." And I talked to several other scientists, and they said, "No, it's not." But in other words, the people who doubled down on no, it's a natural origin.
Yeah,
just continued to pour cold water on it and essentially use their authority. We're top scientists. Who are these people? Well, those people are not just someone who
with a chemistry set.
Chemistry set rules. They are actually all three of them fucker scientists who get paid salaries to be scientists.
Yeah. It's not a hobby.
No.
Okay.
It's not a hobby.
A quick question then. If what you're describing there is the smoking gun.
It's half of the smoking gun. It's half of it.
Okay. What's the other half?
See, well, this is the thing. So it sort of got blocked there with these other scientists going, "No, we're very senior. This is rubbish." Okay. And then a little while ago, a few weeks ago, the US Right to Know group. Now, they're one of the groups that have been the people forcing the release of all of the
all the emails and
messages.
Emails, yeah.
Right, and one of their reporters is a woman called Emily Kopp. I haven't spoken to her. I think you've spoken to Emily Kopp.
I did, but I don't know. Was it 6 months ago when Fauci was in front of? Was it at Capitol Hill or somewhere like that?
Yep, that's right. Yeah. And I've talked to one of the other people at US Right to Know, and they actually were helpful when we were making the film.
Yeah.
They then got hold of something called D.R.A.S.T.I.C, which was a proposal put in by our old friends EcoHealth Alliance to the NIH for funding for this D.R.A.S.T proposal. And what's interesting about it, and the D.R.A.S.T proposal is from 2018.
Right.
That's when they put it in. What's fascinating about it is in the proposal, they outline an experiment which would give you a synthetic virus exactly with the structure that Alex Washburn and the others found when they analyzed SARS-CoV-2.
Right. Wow.
Including the particular restriction enzymes, the particular endonucleases. So everything that they found when they analyzed
was
SARS-CoV-2,
in this report,
which they said was really unusual, is exactly what the D.R.A.S.T proposal was asking money for to do.
Yeah.
Now, you put those two things together.
Yeah.
And that is, as you said, as close to a smoking gun as you're ever going to get. And another one of the people who was in the film, Nicholas Wade, who was used to work for Nature many years ago, and we interviewed him in the film. He wrote a really good article where he also just said, put these two things together and, this is ridiculous. So it's not like it's just me.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to do is this thing about smoking gun drives me slightly potty, because I don't know about you, Ian, but how many cases have you ever read about or heard about in the news where someone was convicted of a murder because when the police got to the murder scene, they found the gun with the smoke still coming out of the end?
With a hand around it.
Okay. And so the one thing that's got me over the last several years is all of this mounting, and it is now a small mountain of evidence, is always poo-pooed by the likes of Anderson and Holmes and Farrer and Fauci as, it's circumstantial evidence. And I kept wanting, I'm one of those lunatics that shouts at the radio. Well, yes, it is circumstantial, but almost every criminal who's ever been convicted of anything is convicted in a court of law on circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
Like they had a motive, they had a means, they were seen entering the building with a balaclava and a big sack with swag.
Yeah.
On the back. It's all circumstantial, but when evidence is only circumstantial, that doesn't mean it's a guess.
Yeah.
And we have so much circumstantial evidence, topped off by what we just described, that the only thing we haven't got is the smoking gun, which would be some scientist from the WIV or one of the other couple of labs there suddenly popping up and going, "Sorry, Governor, it was me. I can't hold back any longer."
Well,
and here's a photograph of me dropping the test tube.
Well, that's what you were sort of saying in the previous podcast that we've done, which is the CCTV footage was lost, deleted, whatever, and also all the records at the time. But there's a collection of internet activists called D.R.A.S.T.I.C, which stands for the Decentralized Radical Autonomous Search Team Investigating COVID-19. God, what a mouthful.
It is. It is. And Gilles was in the film, and he was, he is one of the central members of D.R.A.S.T.I.C. And he joins us here today.
Thanks a lot.
Gilles, why did D.R.A.S.T.I.C get together then? I mean, why not just leave the investigation of COVID to the virologists and government scientists?
Because very quickly, I think it became clear that something wasn't working. So I got that realization very quickly, I would say in April, May 2020. And a few other people got it maybe a bit earlier. So BD and a few other people in the group got that realization much earlier. What we realized is that there was a public discourse, a public narrative that was at odds with any scientific method and with the necessary, I would say, care and need for data that would be necessary really to actually substantiate any hypothesis. And at the time, we could tell that there was basically no data. There were reasons to think that it might be a zoonosis, but there were also reasons to think that it might not be a zoonosis. And what was not scientific at all was to dismiss very vehemently and very aggressively the possibility that it wasn't just a straightforward zoonosis. More than anything else, it's a negation, it's that denial of the possibility that raised some doubts. I think if people had said, well, yeah, maybe there's something there, then most of people within D.R.A.S.T.I.C wouldn't have looked at it. They'd say, okay, well, fine, people are questioning this, things will move on and we'll eventually know. But that's not what happened.
Yeah, no, I remember that because I was following it at the same time, although I didn't meet you until later. Like you, as soon as they said, we are absolutely certain and it can't possibly be from a lab leak, and anyone who thinks so is a conspiracy theorist, that I just thought they can't possibly have the data for that certainty. And we know that they didn't now.
They didn't have the data. No, they didn't have the data. That's why they still had to at least try to organize something, which wasn't organized until January 2021, effectively, with that first WHO mission, if we can call it so. There was nothing, effectively. There was nobody on the ground. There was no data sharing that we can speak of. There was just a blank denial. But what became very apparent, too, is that the whole debate, which should have been a scientific debate, became very quickly entangled into some politics. And for anybody in New Zealand like me or in the UK like you, I think that you become very tired very quickly of the capacity of the US politics to basically mess up any essential subject. And that was an essential subject.
Yeah, it was. Well, look, can we talk a bit about, you've done a lot of work on looking at the early cases, because the official Chinese is that the first cases were in December and that they didn't know about human transmission until January, 20th, I think?
It all becomes a problem of semantic. And obviously the Chinese version tries to play the semantic to the advantage. But the reality is that they're effectively not telling the truth. You hardly judge people from what they do, okay? And there are some important landmarks there. The first things that we have to remember is that the virus was actually identified and nearly fully sequenced by the 27th of December 2019. Yeah. So before we even knew anywhere in the world that there was something happening in Wuhan, one laboratory in Shenzhen, which is Vision Medicals, had found the virus into the sample of someone from Wuhan and had sequenced it. More than that, they had done a very good initial analysis, which showed them that it was a SARS-like viruses, and they immediately concluded that it might be, or it may be, contagious. They even actually on the 26th of December started speculating whether it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is quite funny.
So this is one Chinese lab is speculating already that it came from Wuhan lab.
On the very day they started sequencing this and doing an analysis, the first thing they did was to speculate that it might have come from a lab in Wuhan. Now, what they did, on the 27th, they had a fairly good sequence. They shared it with the hospital in Wuhan, which was one central hospital at the time. And they shared it with the Wuhan CDC. They shared it with the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences in Beijing. And on the 27th, one hospital in Wuhan, which is a main respiratory hospital, Jinyintan, Basically, they were told already to look into taking some of these cases of what was until that day a fairly unknown disease. But the dean and the director of that hospital learned that a sequence had been identified in Shenzhen, and they asked the laboratory to share the sequence with them. So that was on the 27th of December 2019.
Wow.
So sharing happened in the evening, and the first thing that the hospital did was to contact the WIV. So at 10 p.m. on the 27th of December 2019, the WIV reviewed the SARS-CoV-2 sequence effectively, and they reproduced the analysis that had just been done within the previous 24 hours in Shenzhen. And they concluded, like the laboratory in Shenzhen, that this was a SARS-like virus, and that it may well be contagious. WIV was already in the loop. They had the sequence effectively on the 27th of December 2019. Not the sequence, not from their sample, but the sequence shared by the laboratory in Shenzhen.
And how far is Shenzhen from Wuhan?
Well, that's miles away, but the sequence came through the post effectively to that laboratory in Shenzhen because the Wuhan Central Hospital shared it with them. Now, I'll go back to that a bit later. But what's important then, because I say we judge people by not what they say, we judge them by the fact, okay, but what happened. As soon as the hospital, which was being designated by the authorities as the hospital that had to take care of these patients, because it was a main respiratory disease hospital in Wuhan. So on 27, they've learned again from the WIV that this virus is effectively likely dangerous. And you know the story. You know that over the 27th to the 31st of December, and even, I think, 1st of January, they moved about 27 cases to Jinyintan Hospital. So all the cases they could quickly find linked to the market, actually, were moved to Jinyintan Hospital. But the way they moved them is very interesting. They moved them by using a negative pressure ambulance. And the
negative pressure ambulance?
Yes. And the negative pressure ambulance was actually disinfected after every single transfer. Okay?
Right. I mean, that's what you transfer an Ebola case in.
Yeah, no, that's what they did. They used their negative pressure ambulance, and they carefully disinfected these after the ambulance after every single transfer. And these 27 patients were moved to the negative pressure ward of the Jinyintan Hospital. So everything was negative pressure.
So what was the exact date of this?
So they learned about it on the 27th, and quickly after they started moving people.
Yeah.
So by the 31st evening, I think most of them, about 22, but already were transferred. And a few more people were transferred on the 1st of January, I think. So that you had about 27. The 27 official cases, remember, the first 27 that were in the news.
So they knew the seriousness of it. That's basically what you're saying.
Sorry?
They knew the seriousness. Yeah.
They knew from the beginning it could be dangerous. Yes, they had the sequence, they had compared the sequence. WIV had agreed, yes, it may be dangerous. And they, again, you judge people by what they do, not by what they say, okay?
Right, yeah.
And what they did was very clear.
I mean, if you go to the bother of putting people in a negative pressure ambulance, but negative pressure, for people who don't know, just means that the pressure inside is less so that nothing can escape. It's it's the way you run the highest level biosecurity labs.
Yeah.
So they didn't just think, this might be a little contagious. If you're using a negative pressure ambulance, you're thinking this could be really dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, let's say you're being responsible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're being responsible. These people, okay, so you have the official discourse and you have what the doctors did in Wuhan, okay? I have to say, especially at the beginning, what they did was extremely responsible.
Yeah.
That's what I would expect anybody who's got any sense to do. I mean, it was an excellent idea to ask the WIV to double-check the sequence in the evening at 10 p.m., which is what they did. It was an excellent idea to put everybody in a negative pressure ambulance. Yeah. It was an excellent idea to decontaminate that ambulance after every single transfer. It took them ages, by the way. Yeah. So yes, they knew that effectively there was something, potentially dangerous from the 27th of December. There's absolutely no doubt, and they acted so. Then it becomes a bit blurry because the official story obviously is that this never happened. Chinese authorities never really explain that. I mean, if you look at the WHO report, you never hear anything about that. Officially, the Chinese are trying to get out of that contradiction by saying that, well, we didn't really know, that it was SARS-CoV-2 was causing that disease. Okay, so you find a virus in these samples, well, it doesn't mean that's what causing the disease. And you have to go, there's some typical criteria that you have to fulfill. And that's correct. You have criteria that you have to fulfill to officially declare that this is the agent that is causing the disease. If you go back to SARS-1, the Chinese at the time totally messed up because they actually didn't really do that properly. They didn't go through this criteria, and initially they were saying that it was chlamydia, or chlamydia was one factor behind the infection. So they messed up the first time around. So people say, and the Chinese said, well, we didn't want to mess up the second time around again. So, we were slow, we were very careful, and so on and so on. And eventually we discussed everything and we made sequence public. Yeah, that's one way of putting it. The reality is that they could have told the world straight up on the 27th of December that they had identified the SARS-like virus.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that they waited meant that several million people left Wuhan to travel to all parts of China, and nearly something like 170,000 people flew out of Wuhan to various points around the world. Waiting a month was not wise.
But you see, that's where we have to understand the dynamics here. The first reaction by the dean and director of Jinintan Hospital, the first reaction of the lab in Shenzhen, which identified this correctly, was very responsible. Okay, these people, they're not political people. Okay, it's a laboratory which is basically doing a very good job. These are very good. It's a very good hospital in Wuhan, doing a very good job. These people are doing their job correctly. What happened next? Well, it sort of it gets caught up in the Chinese political nonsense. It's not in the end anymore, or these people, these frontline people. It's from the 31st of December, after the outbreak became public, the whole thing became a political issue.
Yeah.
And the politics means that it's not anymore responsible people making responsible decision. It's irresponsible people making silly decisions, and that's what happened until around the 20th or 22nd of January. And it's really annoying to see that the frontline people did the right thing, but immediately they got sucked up in that mess of the Chinese politics where you can't make this public because wait a second, we've got our political meetings, and we can't do that, so please don't say anything.
Yes, because the first papers, like Zhao and Zhao's paper, the Chinese scientists reported what they found. They did all of the work on the ground.
Yeah, and that's what's amazing. And when you read the testimonies of many of these doctors, many of them are absolutely desperate. They just, when they looked at what happened, they just think, what? I mean, what happened? I mean, the person who, did the initial analysis of the virus on the 26th, 27th December, she's a very good scientist, and she wrote superbly about how sad and dispirited she was that all the warnings that she gave were not followed, not followed up. And you've got the same thing. So many doctors in this hospital who did an excellent job have expressed their disappointment of being led down by the politics that basically engulfed the whole issue until effectively around the 22nd of January. Then after that, you had a brief period of transparency, and these doctors were able to do their job again. But this finished very quickly, and by the end of February, everything was back into cover mode and, absolutely non-transparent and non-cooperative.
Yeah.
Yes. When, from your research, Gilles, do you think the infection started? We will never be able to be precise, but I mean, the official version is it didn't really start until the beginning of December.
Well, it's a difficult question, and the problem is that some of the arguments are really arguments that only excellent specialists with that an agenda can make. So I'm not the most qualified at all to discuss this. What I'm going to talk about is the data, okay? Mm-hmm. And the data points to the fact that there were certainly, quite certainly, actually some November cases known by the Chinese authorities. Part of the work I've done on the early cases was to show that the actually as seen South China Morning Post leak of March 2020, which had about 256, I think, cases for December and 9 more cases for November. Part of my work was to show that the December part, the 256 cases, is actually correct. And you can actually show that from official data from little known but very important peer-reviewed Chinese papers. So basically, the 256, the December part, is correct, which leads me to think that the November part is likely very correct too. November part at 9 cases.
And these are cases that have been officially diagnosed?
These were cases that were actually, they were basically either confirmed or diagnosed. Right. They're not in the official statistics. They are what I call the gray numbers, okay? You have two different, you've got different types of numbers. You've got the official numbers that were given to the WHO, which I would call the white numbers. They are the numbers on which all the sort of market papers and all the discussion of World PK and so on is based on.
Sure.
Then you have the gray numbers. The gray numbers are the numbers which were in the official database, CDC database, at the end of February 2020. And these gray numbers show about 256 effectively cases for December, either confirmed or diagnosed, and another 9 most likely for November. So these are the gray numbers. That's the numbers that were identified very quickly through a few weeks of a retrospective search. So very, not a long retrospective search, only a few weeks. That's what they found, but that's what the Chinese didn't want to actually make public. So you can still find it because, as I say, at the beginning, they had a few troubles controlling everything very well. So you can find actually peer-reviewed papers that actually let you put everything together. But the official discourse very quickly was that, that there were not that many cases, there were only 174 cases, there were no November cases, and so on, and so on, and so on. So the white numbers. And there's what I call the black numbers. Remember that what I described there, the 256 plus some possible November cases, is only the result of a few weeks of retrospective search in mostly February 2020. And that retrospective search was largely focused on some hospitals or some areas of Wuhan, and there wasn't that much time to do it.
Sure.
So there are more cases than that. Mostly, most likely there are many more cases, but we never know about it. The Chinese didn't look at them, didn't find them, so we're not going to find them anyway. There are what I call the black numbers. Now, to give you a bit of an idea of what we're talking about, officially, if you look at the WHO numbers, there are about, I think, 15 people who fell ill in December 2019 who died.
Yeah.
One of the 2 papers I mentioned there, which is a peer-reviewed paper by absolutely top team in China, shows that actually the number is 33. So 33 people who fell ill in December actually died. That's twice the number, the official number. And that's in a peer-reviewed paper. Of these 33, 29 are confirmed. So, there's no doubt, 29 confirmed, and the 4 remaining ones are diagnosed. So that's twice already the official number, okay?
Yeah, and the mortality rate is not that high. So if that many people die...
They are died by, I think, the 20th of February, so some may have still died later. Sure. But Yeah, I mean, if you look at the mortality rate and you know that already 33 have died while they fell ill in December, gosh, you just wonder how widespread was the bloody thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, wait a minute. What is the mortality rate?
It's a very difficult question because at the beginning, when there is no identification of the virus and people don't necessarily know, they don't diagnose it correctly, and they don't treat it correctly, obviously, the mortality rate may be higher, but it will not be necessarily much higher than when you got thousands and tens of thousands of people falling ill and basically overcoming all of the hospitals and so on. So it's a fine balance, it's a fine balance between different factors. So I don't like speculating about that, and it depends on exactly on the strain and a few other conditions.
Okay. Yeah, right.
So it's difficult. But let's say 33 people would die, it means, bloody hell, what we see is just the top of the iceberg, obviously.
Yeah.
We're only looking at the worst cases, okay? And the Chinese are very clear. They only looked at the worst cases. If you look at their retrospective search, they very clearly say, we're only looking at the worst cases, okay? I mean, we're not looking at asymptomatic, forget about it. We're not even interested. We're not even looking at mild cases, or not interested. We're only looking at the worst cases, bad or very bad, basically. That's what we're looking at. That's what we found.
Then how far back do you think, from looking at those numbers, do you think the cases go?
I can't speculate on that. This becomes very, very complex. There's been some very good paper. I think Kumar et al. Is a very good paper. That's our approach. Seems fairly good. They're looking at and they based their model and their results on not only Chinese sequences, but worldwide sequences, which is better than what Pekka et al. Did, Pekka is one of the market papers. I went through, I think I compared about 10 or 15 papers, and I looked at what the mutation clocks and models were telling them. You see quite a bit of convergence towards saying that it happened, the first case really would have happened somewhere in October to early November. That's fairly common. Some people go much further. So, you've got a long tail that sort of tapers away. And that tail, if you cut it at 5%, you can go September. But I think most, depending on the model and different ways of doing it, I think October, November, early November, October definitively are fairly good and reasonable estimate.
Yes. When did the 3 scientists at the Wuhan Institute fall sick? Do we know?
Oh, so there are different stories about that. What we've heard is that it would be November 2019. I think I've heard that possibly one, at least, was late October. But I don't base any of what I've told you on this, okay? I'm not thinking about that. It's totally unrelated in my mind. But yeah, the story is maybe late October, but definitely, if not late October, definitely the beginning of November.
Okay, so then there would be 3 scientists, and they were very, very closely. They were the scientists who were working on the WIV's COVID.
So
one was the lead virus collector, one was the senior experimentalist, and one was the lead author on the 2000 paper where they created the 8 new chimera viruses. So I mean, it's not like it was the cleaner and the doorman. They were the people in the lab.
Right. Yeah, at the same time, I didn't make too much of this because it gets a bit complex. I really don't like when people talk about patient zero. They may themselves be down the line of any infection.
Yes, because we don't know who. We never
don't know. We have no idea. Maybe it's a colleague of them at somewhere in one university animal lab. These people meet all the time.
Sure.
God knows.
Yeah, and there were at least 3 labs handling the stuff in Wuhan.
So we don't really know. But what's interesting in this story, and I think we need to think seriously about this. So obviously there was an order, signed by President Biden to actually release the name of these people. And this didn't happen. So the names were not released when the very short intelligence piece, declassified intelligence piece, was published. Now that is very interesting because if the names were wrong, you would have thought they would have said so. I mean, you don't have to give the name to say the names are wrong, okay?
That's true, yeah.
All you have to say is that intelligence points to the fact that the suspected, patients in this laboratory are not the one mentioned, or you can even say, if I'm not from this laboratory, you say intelligence has got no indication that these people worked at that laboratory. That's it, you've killed it, okay? Easy peasy, It's not that difficult, okay, to actually tell that these are not the researchers, okay? Well, guess what? They didn't do it.
What does that make you think, Najil?
That makes me think that the intelligence was perfect, what the leak was correct. I mean, if there was a way, if it wasn't correct, it would have been killed. The intelligence declassification would have killed it. End of the story, no question.
Yeah.
It didn't because it is correct. The problem now they have now is that what does it mean? Does it mean that they had a very bad flu? No, you have to remember, by the way, that in November 2019, nobody officially knew about COVID, okay? And quite possibly, you could even imagine infection in the laboratory where the people who get infected don't even know what they're getting, okay? And that's actually the way most often lab-acquired infection work.
Yes, that's how all of the leaks that I know of have happened.
Yeah, exactly. But, someone wakes up in the morning, but they don't say, oh, gosh, I got that virus I was working on, 3 days ago. That's not the way it works. Someone gets something, and sometimes it's not even direct. You get this lab-acquired infection where someone has got no idea they got it. You've got cases in Beijing where people were not even involved in the research, but they think, they may have talked to someone in the corridor, got it, and was asymptomatic, and so on. That's a kind of story. In Singapore in 2003, they couldn't really tell how that student got it. It wasn't easy. Most of the time, and that people don't realize that most of the time in the case of a lab-acquired infection, nobody really pieces it up at the beginning. Nobody really understands what happened. Even the people, quite often, even the people who get it,
Yes.
So what does it mean? Yeah, we can't really tell. Maybe they had a bad flu, maybe they didn't. But the only way to know that would be to have a look at CT scans. And I'm not sure, I've heard that actually the US intelligence may have had the CT scans, but I don't know. I don't have any proof about that. But I think the CT scans would be the best thing you could do today to try to make sense of whatever these people are at that time.
Yes, but if you had the CT scans, you'd have a very good chance of.
But you're not going to find someone saying, "Oh, we tested these people on the 15th of November for COVID-19, and they didn't have COVID-19." No, sorry, it doesn't work like this.
No. This has always bothered me. I just want to get your opinion on it. People like the US Right to Know, they've been one of the main groups putting in all of the freedom of information requests, which have brought to light all of the texts that were going between Fauci and Farah in the UK.
Yeah.
But presumably, those emails would have been available to the intelligence communities.
You don't even know. You'd be surprised.
No, we don't know, but if the intelligence communities were doing their job, and if they had been asked, as they had been, to look into all of this, surely there's only two conclusions. Either they're utterly incompetent and they didn't even ask, or they did ask and then didn't tell us.
Okay, just remember, please, that we don't even know whether diffuse was shared with these people. We released, D.R.A.S.T.I.C released diffuse just after the Biden report. And if you remember, the Biden report was first, the summary was published in September. Diffuse came out, and then there was, just after we published diffuse, there was a longer summary. I think it was a 10, 12 pages summary that was published after that. And they didn't even bother in that longer form, which was published after we released Diffuse. They didn't even bother mentioning Diffuse. I mean,
when you say diffuse, just tell people what you mean by diffuse.
Yeah. Diffuse was a big was that leak we got from a Navy guy about the experiments that Equals Alliance was planning to do with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And part of what they were trying to do was exactly to basically insert an FCS into some backbone and then do some...
And this is what had both...
And when we released that, everybody said, no, it must be a fake, can't be true.
Yes, because it was so close to a smoking gun in the sense that
it is.
Here's them saying that we want to do this and can we have the funding for it, and then exactly what they wanted funding for is what erupts and affects the world. You think, hang on, it's coincidence or what?
But the good thing is that, in a way, it happened by itself. It's a miracle.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked, as you know, in the film to the chief scientist who was advising the Biden intelligence report. I mean, he could only tell us a certain amount, but it was very clear from what he said that they, to put it mildly, had suspicions that if they were already saying we want funding for it, then they were probably already a long way down the road of doing that, because that's generally how that kind of research works. You're already doing the experiments when you ask for the funding.
Yeah. The other thing people have to remember, the only people really asking for funding was Equals Alliance, okay?
Yeah,
the Chinese don't need that funding, they can do it without it, okay? The only reason D.R.A.S.T.I.C was asking for funding is to stay in the loop, okay? Because he could see the train basically leaving the station.
So you're saying the Chinese were probably already doing it. Well, it makes sense. They had all the technology from Ralph Barron.
Come on. Do you think that the Chinese basically need to beg the US to do the
No, I was just being tactful, Gilles. I know it's not my style, but I was trying.
The only thing is that, you've got D.R.A.S.T.I.C basically, on the platform seeing the train leaving the station, and he wants to jump on it. That's all. That's about it, That's what it's all about. Now, to go back to this story.
Sorry, I sidetracked you, Gilles. Sorry.
We released Diffuse in towards the end of September, and then that longer version of the intelligence report comes in about 2 or 3 weeks later. They don't even mention Diffuse, okay? They don't even mention it.
All right.
Yeah, why do you think that was? I mean, because they must have known.
In the report, they said if new information comes in, they should be an update. Well, guys, you've got a mountain of new information that came in, and you don't even mention it. Oh, a bit embarrassing, isn't it?
Would it have anything to do with Fauci receiving a big pay increase to prevent pandemics?
Look, it's obvious that they would rather not discuss it. Okay. that thing that nobody wants to discuss, like the Department of Energy update, is not something that the DNI was really keen on. She gave it a first-class funeral in the footnote 46 of the report, actually.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And everybody sat on it for as long as they could. Yeah, no, there are things that, there's a bit of a resistance, I would say.
A bit of resistance. Yeah, fair enough. And I don't know if this is something you want to talk about or not, but people have looked at the Wuhan military games. It's something I looked at when I was researching the film. The fact that happened in October, and that the village for the athletes was in the same part of Wuhan as the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the wet market. There were 10,000 foreign athletes from the various foreign military, because it's a military games.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any importance to that? I at the time we were doing the research for the film, I looked at it, but I couldn't stand it up more solidly enough. Do you think anything has changed?
Yeah, exactly the same thing. Look, it's an interesting subject. The problem is you can't substantiate it.
No, that's why I didn't do it.
And you can write up a nice story about it. You can see how this could happen, and so on and so on. The problem is, where's the data?
Yeah. I mean, all the data that there is sort of retroactive when the various athletes, because I talked to some of them saying, I felt really sick. I've
Yeah.
and they describe symptoms, but of course they're describing it after the fact, and then there is this sort of vague correlation. I don't know how strong it is between the number of athletes from each country who
Yeah.
reported sick, and then the scale of the outbreak in that country
Yeah,
later.
but even the correlation
it's-
doesn't mean much because
No, exactly.
we factors and so on. That doesn't really mean much at the end
No.
of the day. I would say yes. There's something happened. By the way, if you've never been to China, the first thing that happens when you get to China, usually you get a tummy bug, and then you get your throat, basically, sort of, you get problems with your throat because of the pollution. And some people, if there's a bug around, some people may start falling badly ill. That's not, unprecedented. I think there's a bit more than that due to the intensity of some of the cases that have been described. But once again, I base my research on data, and I don't.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I didn't include it in the film, because I could take it so far and it looked really promising. But when my colleague Jan Klinkowski asked me the hard questions, I couldn't provide the data. So he said, look, we can't put it in the film. Where's the actual solid data? And I had to say,
but everything I've told you so far is based on data. I mean, data,
well, that's why we're talking to you, Gilles, because you are missing the data. Yeah.
So I mean, when I said the virus was first sequenced on 27, and on 10 p.m. on the 27th, the WIB did its analysis of that virus. I've got to prove, I'm not speculating. It's data. End of the story. When I tell you there's 33 people who died, who got infected with the virus in December, who died by end of February, there's data from top quality papers, Chinese papers. No, data is there. I'm not making this up.
And also there's the science behind it, because if you've got 200 odd cases in December, the way the virus is spread, you can't. It's just not the way the world works to think that all 200 cases mean that it started in December, because you don't go from 0 to 200 cases. That's not the way viruses spread.
I mean, there's a lot of problems there, and it is a misrepresentations that have been made by some scientists who should know better, who are epidemiologists, who would have studied, what proper epidemiology is. Simplifications are just horrendous, okay? I think in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, when people will look at this again, they'll say, come on, people could not say that seriously. But that's where we are today.
Some of these people have, you can say, oh, I wasn't feeling very well that day and I may have done some shoddy work, but it's so shoddy you did it on purpose. I mean,
no. So yes, and so we're getting into a big issue, and that's where when you look at it with the benefit of hindsight, it's a very sad story. And I'm not sure whether people really understand what happened, but really what happened at the beginning is that in January up to, I would say, the 15th of January or 12th of January at least, but even a bit later, and I'll explain why. Everybody, I mean the WHO, the US, they wanted basically the Chinese to share data. They wanted the Chinese to share data about the early cases, and they wanted them to share data about the virus. So what was decided at the time was to be very nice to China. This was decided by people who even today on the US side are fairly critical. Okay, people like Kadlec basically agreed at the time that, with NASM, National Academy of Medical Sciences or of Medicine in the US, they agreed that the best attitude to have was to be supportive of China.
Yeah, I've talked to people, very senior people in this country, and they say the same thing.
Yeah, and this happened to us at the WHO, so they agreed with the WHO that, look, let's just be nice. And you have to remember at the time, nobody knew that it would be what it turned out to be. Nobody knew that there would be millions of deaths. I mean, it's best what people could imagine at the time, that there would be maybe 1,000 deaths or 2,000 deaths, just like with SARS-1, okay? So it's no big deal. In that context at the time, it made a certain sense to try to be supportive of China and shut up, not disclose all the dots you had, and try to create a very positive narrative. And to try to get access to the data, they don't play it deliberately. They have very real, questions about the possible origin of the virus. They decided it's not worth it. Just play nice. Let's get the data. That's more important. Okay.
Yeah, and it's worth saying though that the reason they were trying to get the data is because the Wuhan Institute of Virology had taken its database, the international database, down in September. So
yeah, but that's one thing. But that's a bit later in a way. What they wanted initially was they wanted access to two things. They wanted access to the sequence. They wanted data about epidemiological data so that they could understand the way this thing was moving. And they wanted access to samples and so on. Okay,
yeah, you're right. That's different set of data. That's hospital data.
People, even today, will tell you are very critical of the China at the time. At the highest level in the US, that's what they had decided. Okay, now that position basically concorded, was aligned with that of the WHO, and it was Farah rolling in that was very much to push for that. Okay, Farah basically decided that that's the right thing to do with Tedros, and he pushed very hard to try to create a narrative.
Just to be clear, Farah was the head of the Wellcome Institute.
Yes, and he's now a chief scientist for the WHO.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Anyway.
It's not that funny, actually. It's
at the time, that's what they decided. And you can understand why they decided that. And because towards the end of January, you started getting a lot of negative articles, but not so negative yet. Trump was still very supportive and so on of China at the time. But they were starting to get negative vibes in the press and so on. And that certainly upset the Chinese. So try to get China to stay on board, and China was still not really sharing very well, and the difficulties getting initially the sequence, and there was still difficulties getting real data, epidemiological data, and so on. So to try to really keep China on board and try to be constructive, they basically shaped a narrative. That was basically the purpose of the Fauci-Farah call.
Yeah.
I tend to call it more the Farah-Fauci call than Fauci-Farah, because really, I think Farah had the key.
I agree with. I think he is the mover. I mean, I think that's why that's why he got his promotion. He got the reward in the end.
Fauci in the end, that certainly aligned with the interests of Fauci, and Fauci would have very nicely played it to his advantage. But the funny thing is that Fauci did not have that much to do. And he had to obviously obfuscate on the NIH grant, which he did very well. But beyond that, he didn't have to do much. At the end, it's people trying to do the best thing in a fog of war. They don't have the benefits of insight, and they think that's the best thing you can do to try to get the very important data that you need to save lives. And they go on and create a stupid narrative about pangolins. And you've got a very naive, I would say, specialist in Australia who jumps on board and goes 100% pangolin. And that satisfies everybody, and then you got a paper written.
Right. When you say the fellow, who are you talking about in Australia?
Olds.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing basically was born out of naivety and necessity. Obviously, today, even if we were parents, I think this is a bit of an orphan because nobody wants to claim that terrible decision.
Yeah, and also it was a small unelected group of senior scientists who all had very serious professional and some of them financial connections
Yeah, I know, and it's
to China, made the decision on behalf of the world, and then 8 million people died.
well, they didn't die because of them, but so we have to be a bit more careful there. But yeah,
Sure, but the one thing follows from the other.
the one thing follows from the other. What you saw was basically a shamble. As I say, it was a bad decision, which was acted with the best intention, and that nobody wants to own today. Okay, that's clear. No, so the pangolin was basically, and the Chinese played their part in it. When on the 7th of February, the South China Agricultural University came up with its 99% claim, which were absolutely rubbish.
It had no scientific basis whatsoever.
No, everybody lapped it up because that's just what they wanted. So everybody lapped it up, obviously, and went away with it. And basically Farah said, okay, I've got what I need now. Thanks a lot. Let's go for it. Okay. The whole thing is a bit of a shamble, but it goes deeper because, obviously very soon the pangolin story was basically destroyed. I mean, and what really destroys it is this simple fact that it doesn't make much sense when you're looking at the sequences.
Alina Chan did a lot of that work.
He did some very good work, which really upset Holmes, by the way, but that's his problem.
I don't have a lot of sympathy for Holmes, I have to say.
Yeah. But anyway, Holmes is a bit naive. I mean, he certainly is a very good scientist, but sometimes the best scientists can actually get themselves in a very bad position. Anyway, what happens there? So they got stuck in that pangolin story. And then you got this research team actually with someone from Western, Xiao et al. That paper.
Xiao and Xiao, yeah.
Yeah. So these people basically did an excellent job.
And then they disappeared, didn't they? Because I couldn't find them at all.
So what happened that these people did a very, very good job, and they tried to get it published in Nature.
Did they? Oh, I didn't know that.
And and the problem they had is that unfortunately, because the pangolin story was the dominant narrative, nobody wanted to publish that paper because
that paper was full of facts.
Yes, but if you go through the FOIs, you actually have all the emails exchange where they just very clearly say, well, we were trying to publish that paper, but they didn't want that paper because it contradicted the official narrative.
Right.
That it was pangolins or directly bats, because they said, well, actually no pangolins were sold in that market and no bats were sold in that market. So sorry guys, your pangolin story effectively doesn't work very well.
Yeah, and they were the scientists who were in the Wuhan market and did the swabs. I mean, they had the actual data in their hands.
The best thing is that then today people are saying, this Chinese scientists, they did everything and so on and so on. Well, actually, no. They did the study. They tried to get it published. And the reason they couldn't get it published is because some Western scientists basically had put up an official narrative that it was pangolins, and proximal origin is fully backed by.
Well, see, that's the essential point, is that it's so easy to say, oh, it was the Chinese government, and it was, but there was a whole Western part of the suppression of the truth and running the narrative. And Nature is supposed to be the world's premier scientific organ for publishing scientific facts, and it makes the decision that it's going to hell with science. We've got a political narrative to run.
Exactly. So they decided to run the political narrative and not basically get Xiao et al. Published, because that got them into a bit of a problem. But the funny thing is that eventually that thing obviously got published.
Yeah, I have a copy.
What did these scientists do then? Well, they looked at it at Xiao et al. And say, okay, well, bad luck, no pangolin, no bat. What do we have there? Oh, we've got some raccoon dogs.
Yeah, that was the next one.
Oh, that's in Xiao, raccoon dogs. And then we got one scientist who said, I've got a photo of raccoon dog from 2014. Yeah. Oh, that's it. So suddenly they pivoted from, after basically they realized they couldn't hold the line anymore, so this line of the pangolins anymore, they basically pivoted immediately to the raccoon dogs.
For which there's no good evidence.
Which eventually, there's no good evidence. So what is Holmes doing today? He's trying to pivot back to the pangolins.
No.
Yes, he is. And the whole story is just, it's just, you're thinking that's science. It's a comedy to me.
Yeah.
The whole thing is a comedy.
Well, it's a hilarious comedy, but unfortunately one that costs lots of lives.
No, it is. It really is a comedy, and it's a bad comedy. And by the way, everybody says raccoon dogs, these bloody Chinese scientists basically, try to hide them. Well, it's not hidden at all. As I've pointed to all these people, the raccoon dogs were actually disclosed to Mbarak when he went to Beijing in July 2020 to negotiate the terms of reference of the WHO mission. If you look carefully to these terms of references, which were published then in November but negotiated in July, August, there are raccoon dogs there. It says raccoon dogs were sold at the market. So all the nonsense where you hear later that, they never said raccoon dogs were sold at the market. Come on, guys, that's not even true. It's just,
Have you ever managed to speak to Ralph Barrett? Because I tried very hard.
No. And what should I talk to him? I think the person is. I quite respect him. He did a very good interview on Italian TV, which I think was very courageous. And I have no reason. And the guy is in a tight spot, But from his interview for the Italian TV, I do respect him.
Okay. Well, listen, Gilles, is there anything else you want to say at this point? I'd like to come back and talk to you again because there's so much to go over. But
no, that's so much. So much you can go through. I think there are two stories here. There's a scientific story, and we can try to look at the available data, at what it says. But the main story, really, about the regime, is not a scientific story. It's a comedy.
Yeah.
It's a comedy, and you have to take it like this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I suppose so. It's just a comedy that you hope is not going to be replayed again, because it was replayed. The first time with SARS-1, and then it was replayed with SARS-2, and you think, are they going to have the same comedy when we have the next one?
Well, it was played in between with some of the, but there was some animal zoonoses too, where China didn't actually share any proper information in between.
Well, no, they didn't do anything with the bird flu.
Yeah, exactly. And if you talk to specialists about that, they tell you it was actually terrible what happened there.
Yeah, and I know that story very well. And you were talking about one of the medical intelligence organizations, and I've been talking to someone in that organization, and yeah, the story, as you say, is the same story again.
It's the same story. And look, why would anything change when it works so well for China?
Yeah.
But it has to change, because let's say the next one is bird flu. If they run the same nonsense again, it won't be 8 million people that die. It'll be more than 10 times that many. We can't have the same nonsense.
I'm afraid we're not part of the decision.
But we'll be the people who'll die.
Yeah.
No, we're not part of the decision. We don't. That's a problem. That's basically the. I think it's called the D.R.A.S.T.I.C problem. There's the fact that you can't control what another country does. That's it.
Yeah.
And we're not part of the decision. We can try. The WHO can try. Everybody can try. But at the end of the day, you had SARS-1, you had the bird flu, you've got COVID-19. I don't see why the next one would be any better. I don't see why.
Well, it might be if people like you keep up the work, because it's been people, you, the rest of D.R.A.S.T.I.C, the US Right to Know, you've been the people who've forced what clarity there has been. So
yeah, right. But our influence is only on Western countries, don't we?
Sure.
Well, that's very interesting, and that's intellectually interesting. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change anything in the habits of some countries. I mean, nobody wants to have to give bad news.
Yeah.
So that doesn't change anything. WHO cannot do anything. WHO is a member of organizations. It depends on its members. It
Yes, that's
cannot
right.
overrule. Yeah.
It has no investigative power at all.
Yeah, no, that's got nothing. I mean, you can sit there and discuss it until the end of time. It won't change anything. I mean, some of the problems are structural problems, and but not, they're fundamental problems. But a bit more difficult. Obviously, you don't want to make the situation so bad that you really make it very difficult for anybody to come clean and try to work things better next time.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy that argument, though, Gilles, because that was the argument they ran, as you said, in the COVID story. But it didn't run any better by kind of on side from SARS-1. So we've already done this. Oh, let's not annoy the Chinese because we need to keep them on board. We've done it now 3 times, and each time it's been worse than the last time. So wasn't it Einstein who said the definition of stupidity is to keep making this, and think it's going to turn out different?
But in this case, you've got no choice. I mean, what do you think is what can the WHO do next time?
Well, they can at least not actually sign up to the lie. They could, rather than, they could say, no, we don't agree with this.
Yeah, well, that's what, that Director General of the WHO did in SARS-1, and she basically, called a bluff and called it a lie, and was very clear about it. And that made a difference because that basically forced the end of the cover-up during SARS-1. Yeah, that's what happened for SARS-1 effectively. But
yeah, so why didn't they do that one this one? Why not? Because it seems like it's got worse.
The lesson that was learned from SARS-1 was that you had to get better control of the WHO effectively. That's what happened.
Oh my God! All right, listen, Gilles, it's been fabulous talking to you. Thank you so much. I know it's late. Maybe we can come back and talk to you again because there's an endless amount to talk about. But in the meantime, Gilles, thanks so much for talking to us, and keep working at it, mate. Keep working at it.
Thanks a lot. Bye, mate.
Bye, mate.
Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed that, don't forget, leave us reviews, and you can look at David Malone's Substack. Thanks for listening.
Thanks very much. Bye.